Hi, I'm Harut Markarian, and this is Mobility and Inclusion, the show where we share the powerful stories of people with disabilities and daring entrepreneurs making waves in our world. From technological innovations to best practices in business, we'll learn what it really means to live in an inclusive and universally designed environment. Hello and welcome. I am Harut Markarian, and this is Mobility and Inclusion, and our guest today is Ashlee Kelly. Ashlee is a social worker by education. She graduated with her Bachelor of Social work in 2018. It took her 8 years to earn her secondary degree as she greatly struggled with her health in the last decade. Ashlee is a person with a disability. She has cerebral palsy as well as hydrocephalus. But she is also a writer of poems and short stories. Ashlee started her own blog in 2017, which addresses stigma, inequalities, and to dismantle bias, unfairness, and ableism. Ashlee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Awesome. We are glad you are here, and we're going to have a great time together today. By the way, thank you for accepting my invitation to come on as a guest. Let's start by giving our audience a little definition of, for those who don't know, what cerebral palsy is and hydrocephalus. Let's start there.
Sure. So my primary condition is hydrocephalus, which basically means water on the brain. You have cerebral spinal fluid that goes from your head down and is virtually recycled. My body doesn't have the ability to do that on its own. So I have a small implanted device in my head, and when it's working, it takes the collection of fluid and drains it so that my intracranial pressure doesn't get too high, because that could be a matter of life and death. And my secondary condition is cerebral palsy. I have spastic dysplasia. So basically that's an umbrella term for a group of neuromuscular challenges depending on where the level of brain injury was sustained. So for me, it's primarily my right side, and the middle of my back down is significantly weaker and quite spastic. Thankfully, I'm very blessed that I have a very minor case of it, but that makes me no less of an advocate and no less impacted. So it allows me to kind of confront that I have challenges, but I present kind of normally, and that's just not true. So that's me.
Well, that's great. And this is a great education for those who don't know what cerebral palsy is or hydrocephalus is. And I wanted to make sure that, our audience knows what we're talking about and what we're dealing with here in this session. So statistically, as I became more versed in the community of people with disabilities, I found out that about 85% of people with disabilities acquire their disability later in life, meaning they're not born with it. So what's your situation with that? Were you born with it, or did you acquire it later?
So they were both as a result of brain injury. At the time, we've come a long way in my almost 30 years. So today it would have maybe been discovered a little sooner, but the likelihood is that I probably acquired both from my birth injury, and it just presented a little later on. But I was born with them. I know no other life, and they're kind of my constant companions.
Awesome. Well, that's great. It's a way of living, a different way of living than most people. So how was it like growing up with a disability, and who was there to explain what was going on with you when you were younger?
So, thankfully, growing up with my specific set of circumstances became more difficult, ironically, as I aged. But for the most part, I had a support system and a family that tried really hard to make sure that I understood that I was different, but that didn't mean that I had to be different than anyone around me. So my friends and my family knew there are certain things that are harder for me, and to give me support there. But I would say the challenges came as I grew up and realized that not everyone around me is accepting, knowledgeable, or welcoming of what's different. I didn't really understand that as a child because children, relatively speaking, are quite open. But as an adult, I found that the more different you are, the more deviant you are, the more there's pushback just in your very being. And I think that was such a large part of why I started my blog, because I had the right to exist. I had the right to take up and claim space, as do all of the members of this community, because people don't realize people with disability are the largest minority group there is. We are here and we exist, and pretending otherwise doesn't change that reality, but it makes our lives harder. So that, I think it was just society ignorance, really, that, and maybe a surgery or two that made things just a little difficult.
For those who don't know, about 60 million Americans are with disability today. So that's a little less than the third of the population, which is quite significant. And this is only in the United States.
Yeah.
So probably in the world, there's 1 billion people with disability, approximately. So, you know, it makes a great sense to design our environment universally, you know, and I talk about this in my book, Mobility and Inclusion, you know, why it makes sense, why it makes great business sense to have products universally designed. And when I say universally designed, I mean, everybody can use it regardless of their ability or disability. You know, it has nothing to do with ability or disability. It's just there for all types of people to benefit from it.
And I think that was something that you had said to me in our very first introduction. You had said to me that too often I found, as a person with disability, that I'm trying to fit into a box, right? Whether that be within my relationships, whether that be within the world, I'm trying to conform to this little box.
Mm-hmm.
And you had said very confidently that it shouldn't be about trying to conform us, but asking the world to accommodate and bend to fit us, because we're here and we exist no differently than you do. So that was something that really struck out to me, especially as a person who is considered able-bodied. To hear you address something that is at such a core of who I am was just absolutely empowering, and very validating as well.
Absolutely. And you know, I didn't know about the community of people with disabilities, to be completely frank. You know, I don't have family members who are people with disability, and I wasn't exposed to that world. All I've seen in my life up until I started this company was just, you know, people on wheelchairs or elderly, right? So once I got into it, and thankfully I had a lot of advocates for people with disabilities as friends who are dear friends to me. So, you know, I started getting the knowledge. As you said, a lot of the time, the knowledge is not there, which is fine as long as you make an attempt to learn about the societies, the communities, right? So, you know, and that's what I did. I was able to learn. And to your point, I came to understand that the people with disability, if we're talking about inclusion, it's not about fitting them into our environment or the ableism environment. Yep. Is changing your environment to fit,
to accommodate everyone.
Exactly. And again, that is going to make a great business sense, because you can only how many people can you change? Let's say how many people with disabilities you can change to adapt to your situation or to your environment, but you can easily change your environment to adapt a lot more people.
Right? Like, how many doors are you potentially shutting for yourself if you're not organically welcoming everyone? 100%. It's a missed opportunity for both sides.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. You know, the show is called Mobility and Inclusion, and we're talking all about inclusion here. So let me ask you this. So what kind of equipment did you use growing up to help you with your daily activities?
So while I'm not proud of it, in order to answer that, I have to be accountable and say that for a very long time, I struggled to accept the reality of who I was and what came with that, because I wanted so badly to kind of fit this ideal. And because of that pressure and those stigmas, I didn't use a mobility aid until I was probably around 16 or 17 years old. I had AFOs, which are orthopedic braces, kind of similar to what you would see in like Forrest Gump. I had worn those as a child to try to strengthen, but I ditched those as quickly as possible. But now I use, I'm actively in recovery, so it depends on the day, but I can go from my wheelchair, my walker, or my cane. And that depends on my strength, my spasticity, or the amount of pain that I'm in as to what I'm able to do. But it's a variety of aids.
Got it. So you use variety of aids to help you maneuver during your day.
Absolutely.
So if I were to offer you something that will make a quantum leap impact in your daily activities, what would you say, or what would you change in your current mobility aids that you're using to give you that quantum leap into how you would want to?
Into independence?
Yes.
As somebody who was actively off and on in school for so long, I think the thing that I was really missing was almost a desk, if you will, or a surface that was attached to my wheelchair so that I had the ability to, say, carry my lunch or my dinner from the cafeteria. I had to have staff help me because you can't carry something and push a chair. But the reality of a tray is that it, if not designed correctly, it can restrict how you move to bend with the wheels, and the weight could throw you off.
Yep.
But that is something, like, carrying things for me is very difficult. Fluids, the other day I ended up wearing a half a gallon of water because I was trying to be, I'm going to say independent, but probably more stubborn. But it's those daily things for me, like carrying things, that are extremely problematic because it's either you carry it or you use your mobility aid. There's no in between.
Yeah. Well, that's great for me to know. As you know, I'm the founder of Marquand Robotics, and this is the way I'm conducting my research nowadays. This is I guess, even though I hate this term, the new normal, Yeah. So, but this is the way I'm conducting my research to know what kind of products would be life-changing for,
Absolutely,
for people with disabilities. And thank you for the insight. I'm going to take that. A mental note and then apply it. Hopefully
I'm sure if anybody can do it, it's you.
Appreciate the confidence. So let me ask you. So we were talking about inclusion. You are a social worker.
I am.
Are you currently employed?
I am currently employed. I'm on medical leave right now because I've had a couple of surgeries in the last 5 months. But my job is still being held. And thankfully, I have an employer that is willing to allow me the time to do what I need to be safe, whilst also not worrying, is that going to be there for me? Do I have to make a choice between my job and my health?
Yeah.
But that is a privilege that not many people have.
Unfortunately.
Not every agency works like that.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to change that. And with Marquand Robotics and Mobility and Inclusion podcast, hopefully we'll be at a place where we can educate corporations and companies to be more inclusive, and we can show them how to do that. So do you ask for special accommodations? Like, how many employers have you had experience with or you interacted with before this one?
I've been employed since I was 16 years old. So right off the top of my head, I can think of 4 or 5 employers, whether that be in a camp, in a gym. I'm thinking about a school tutor. I worked with victims of assault, and now what I do as a BI. So about 5.
So 5 that who are inclusive, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, that's great to know.
Yeah, but all of that hinged on my ability and my comfort level, more so, to know what was a right versus a privilege, and the ability to say, I need help, but that doesn't make me any less able to do this. I just need some room to be creative here. And if you don't understand that, then I'm afraid we can't further a partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, that partnership starts by the hiring organization. Shouldn't be coming from you as the person with disability. They should adjust, and I cannot stress this enough, they should adjust their environment to fit you and not the other way around.
Absolutely.
Now I think we covered your challenges and the inclusiveness, and let's talk about your blog a little.
Oh, my baby.
So I know you said you write poems and short stories. Are you going to share a poem with us today, or it's tough? I don't want to pressure you.
I certainly could. My poems are a little less about my experiences as a person with disability, and more so just as a young woman who's been through, I'm sure, the very same things that anyone around me has. I am more than a disability, which is my blog, however, has absolutely been a resource for me. It's been a sense of healing, and really just a very safe place for me to begin to nurture and understand how I feel, and hopefully try to pull that together in a way that can also be healing to someone else.
That's great. That is great. So where can people find your blogs?
Sure. The URL is More Than a Disability. It also comes up as IME. My name is Ashlee Brady Kelly. That is attached to my Instagram, which you found, which is Ashlee Kelly _IME blog. And if you need a laugh, that's the place for you. If you need kind of confidence and permission to be yourself, that's in it for you. And if you just kind of need to understand that I have challenges, but I am absolutely just like everyone else, this is the place for you, because I put it all out there so that somebody else understands that while it might not be talked about in their realm, people are safe and welcomed in that space, because I needed that growing up and it wasn't a resource. So I want it to be there for other people.
That's actually, this is a great segue for my next question. I was going to ask you, what would you recommend for people in the same situation as you, or a suggestion? What would you tell them?
2 things. First one might make me a tad emotional, but the first thing I would say is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with who you are and what makes you who you are. Different does not mean deviant. And the more that society sees differences and learns to celebrate them, the safer off you'll be. But I spent a very large part of my life trying to conform and deny, and it wasn't until I embraced who I was that I thrived. So understand and accept first that you have a right to exist and celebrate that, and then The second thing that was really helpful to me was surrounding myself or having people or someone in my circle that may not have had the same condition, but we had the same lens on the world. I can think of 10 people off the top of my head that have varying abilities and diseases and conditions. And I know that if I'm having a bad day, if something wasn't accessible, if I got called a derogatory name, that I have a network that I can reach out to, that I don't have to explain why it stung, that they just know that was not right, and I hear you. And I think the more you surround yourself with what is in your community, the more you belong and the more you can celebrate it. So I would definitely say to find your people, find your tribe. I'm a little biased, but the disability community is accepting because we know what it's like not to be. So if I'm out in the street and I see somebody who moves like me, I might go and say hi to them or them to me, and it's like instant connection.
Yeah.
It's such an empowering feeling. Find your tribe.
Yes, that's very important. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you look at it. There's this thing that when people should always develop themselves, right? It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, how much education you have, you can always improve. You can always get more knowledge.
Sure.
And as you acquire more knowledge, and knowledge come from various places, some people who don't fit in your upward success are going to left behind. And that is good for you. You don't want to associate yourself with people who are bringing you down, or not on your trajectory of growth.
Absolutely.
So I resonate with what you said, and I hope what I said resonates with our audience. And for my last question, so you know a little bit about what we do here, whether it's in Marquean robotics and mobility and inclusion. What do you think, what kind of advice would you give us to improve the quality of life for people with disabilities?
I really have to go back to our initial conversation, and that was the harsh reality that as a man, as an able-bodied person, society has set it up in a way that your voice might hold more power than my own. But what I found really inspiring with you is that you were taking your privilege and your standing to amplify the voices that are a little bit more hushed. Because the reality is that we can be here talking and speaking, and I can write about it all day long, but if I don't have somebody to help elevate that, it's not going to go very far. And that's what I think you and your company do amazing with, is having that power, but also allowing us to guide the conversation and to educate you, because you can only understand based on the knowledge we give, because we just live very different perspectives. But I think you were doing that right. So I would say just continue to do it because it matters.
Awesome. More things to come from on our end, and I deeply appreciate your time with us. We're gonna stay in touch, of course, and we're gonna hopefully we'll collaborate at some point down the line.
Anytime.
Awesome. I wanna thank you. I wanna thank everybody for tuning in. I wanna remind everyone that an accessible world is an inclusive world. Yes. Let's make life accessible for all.
It's possible. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ashlee. Have a great evening.
You as well. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch.
We'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.